sometimes reached a pretty big height, and there was nowhere to go back then. Music wasn't up there.
As it turns out, there was a vacancy in a band called Fraternity, and the bass player, Bruce Howe, invited Bond to join the band. Fraternity were a band that took themselves very seriously. They were writing their own music, and they had huge musical ambitions.
When I saw Bond singing the Valentines, I couldn't understand why he wasn't being more. And I thought, what's he doing? He could really go places. He seemed to be much happier in his new role, but he was the man. There is no question that Bond wanted to be a rock star and go as far as he could possibly go. He lived for it. He lived for it.
First prize, $2,000 for the best. A return trip to Los Angeles by P&O from Adelaide, Fraternity. You did it for Adelaide too. When did it do it for you?
The band was really interested in going to America, but Bond's past had caught up with him, and now his misdemeanors and his marijuana possession from the Valentines prevented him from getting a green card. So it was decided that the band would go to England.
Towards the end of 71, Bond met Irene, as she sort of moved in. The management decided that Irene Wise would get a free trip to England, girlfriends had to pay. Months later, they were married.
The band and their entourage ended up moving to England. There was 17 people, including the roadies, and they were hoping that they would be the next big thing in England.
London was a disaster, I think, for the band. They found it very hard to get work. It felt very quickly to me, it felt like we were the wrong band at the wrong time.
We went to England and we got a house, 20 people in one house, a 3-bedroom house, and we played gigs that cost us twice as much money to play as it did get paid for them, you know. It wasn't a waste of time, you know, I learned so much from it, but, you know, back in the head against the wall.
Bond's performance style at that time was, well, basically there was no style. He would just stand there and sometimes with his head down.
He stuck to the microphone stand like a security blanket, and he didn't use the stage. And I'd say, you know, you go reach anybody that's at the back of the room rather than sort of just the people that are down the front. And we talk about how to use television, to look down straight down the barrel, follow the camera.
Bond was like spontaneous, he was learning and taking and grabbing, you know, bits to make his craft better. And Fraternity was where Bond learned to sing, was where Bond learned to be a front man. Also, I think it was a really great place for him to launch out.
We worked with Brian Johnson's band in England, 2 shows, and Don and I was standing at the hall, and he said to me, this guy is really good, you know, a good singer. And Brian sort of like struck up a little bit of a friendship over the 2 days. Little friend involved, and we were just driving down to with Rockland and friends or musicians from Australia. We never even wanted to hear all about it.
But after a couple of years of struggle, Fraternity had to admit defeat in England, and they came back to Australia and they basically fell apart. and that put a strain on all their relationships. Ron and Irene basically had separated. He's not in a band for the first time in 10 years. He had to get a day job at the Wallaroo fertiliser plant on the Port Adelaide docks, and he thought his dreams were over.
If we didn't work for a week or so, you know, that's it. He go nuts. It was a pattern. He was really, really steady until he got bored and he wasn't working. That's when he would start doing wild things. There was no future, there was only now. And he would take risks on his motorbike. He knew you were right out whether he lived or died the next day. There was a pattern of Ron. He did get bored very quickly. He never worried about too much.
Ron's life was about I think he's pushed the envelope. It was just in his nature.
My mother always told him off. He dreamed. And that was from 16, 17. But you could say it once, maybe twice. After that, he argued. Well, he's a wonderful guy, you know. I love him heaps. We lived under the same roof for 5 years. The only thing that mattered to him in the world was getting up there and being the successful for a band. I just couldn't understand why anybody cared about everybody who loved him. That's really what the end is about. My God, we all knew this wasn't going to end well.
Things took a turn for the worse when Bond had an argument. Bond was upset, he had a bit to drink, and against all advice, he roared off on his motorbike into the night.
On the 3rd of May 1974, we were heading back from Port Adelaide after going to the Cedars Hotel, and on one driving through my 1956 FC Holden, looked up the road and there were no cars coming, saw some headlights in the distance. As we were turning right into Rosetta Street, a motorcycle came out from nowhere. The motorcycle hit the car, rider came half through the windscreen and saw it hit the head, hit the roof of the vehicle.
It was a shocking set of injuries. He had blood coming down from his helmet.
It was about 36 hours later on Sunday morning, we opened up the Sunday Mail and we went down at Bond Stop from fraternity, was the victim of the accident.
My mother, she's really quite over. Because they were told you might not make it. So it was pretty serious. He had a fractured skull, he had crushed ribs, his teeth were missing, his jaw was wide up, and he was a mess. I was angry and so disappointed, I didn't even go on the street.
Bond was out of action for months. He had to end up working for Vince Osprey, putting posters up and driving vans around.
He had a limp, it was very difficult to walk, he had a walking stick, and he was worried that he would not be able to get up and sing again. His problem was he was 27. He knew most people were finished by the time they were 28, 30. I think he thought his time was coming to an end. He had to do it quick, and he had nowhere to go at that time.
Although the crash was tragic, it was also serendipitous. But for the crash, Bond mightn't have been in town when a new young hotshot band called AC/DC came to Adelaide a couple months later. AC/DC weren't happy with their lead singer Dave Evans. At the time, the guy we had to do was German and vocal. You know, we felt, well, we wanted more like rock and roll. Bond's old friend Vince Lethbridge suggested that AC/DC take a look at Bond.
My son was a bit older. And I said, mate, you rock the arse off you guys. And no mistake about that.
Bond came to see AC/DC right here at the Bridgeway Hotel in Adelaide. He got up and sang a few songs that night with them.
I was really shitting myself, man. They had me around 27 years old, you know. They were in about 18 at the time, you know, 16 or whatever it was. And I thought, can I keep up with this guy? You know, my God, you know, he's going to kill me.
I think from the moment you got on stage, you just, just one of those people that have that presence. So you more like asking if you're talking for a gig, you know?
That was it. Bond didn't hesitate. He packed his bags and he was off with AC/DC.
There was no question that he was saying. There was no question that he was accepted as being the new lead singer, the new singer in the band.
Word got around, it went around like wildfire, that Bond was actually joining the band. It did not surprise me one bit. I just thought it was a match made in heaven.
Yeah, but Keith Smithy, he had tattoos all over him, he was loud, he was cussing, but he just fit in so well with the band, it was ridiculous.
Bond was totally more extroverted. I couldn't believe the change from fraternity to AC/DC. It was just like a different person. It was just a photographer's dream, really, to photograph Bond. He was very excited. Like a kid in a candy shop. He was, his dream was actually coming true. This was the real deal.
I remember sitting in the studio watching them record, and it was just, they were just on. They were, I think, on. And it was, it was frightening to watch one of them just sitting in a chair like I'm sitting and playing some guitar. They were just absolutely, as if they had 10,000 people watching it, just going for it. I had goosebumps right through me.
All the while, Bond had his notebook of phrases and lyrics, and it was lightheartedly called toilet poetry. Lines into order of film, potential lyrics.
You got to keep your eyes there, but lines and words and all that, ideas and just pictures, you know? And sort of
Kangaroo.
and you run around, you know?
They were definitely liable. I mean, just about every song had something to do with sex. But very clever.
He wrote poetry from the street. It wasn't pretty, but it was real, it was working class. This is how the people who bought AC/DC records talked. They related to Bond's words.
Many people see your use of indecent language in your act as, well, outrageous. You see it as an essential part of your act.
I was going to say fucking say it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, play.
One champion video on ABC TV.
Yeah.
That was sort of almost tailor-made for ACDC. Colour television, this explosive band, and over the next few years, ACDC would appear on Champion nearly 40 times. They would absolutely thrive on the atmosphere of having the audience there touching it. It really gave him the opportunity of working the stage. He just ate up television. He was made for it. It was all about young Australian artists that were coming forward with completely new approaches to music from the time of the 70s. And then Bond had that little scribble on the back of the book, you know, there's a long way to the top, all the rock and roll, which I think said it all, especially for a band like us, you know, we felt, well, you know, just be playing rock and roll music, we'll be, a long way to the top. So. When Molly said to me, okay, one way to the top, I think it's going to be a number one hit, it's going to be Nancy. So Bond wants to be able to include the bagpipes in any sort of clip that we might do. So my thought was, how about we put AC/DC on the back of the truck and have them sing the song as they're going down Swansea Street? Bob was wrapped, he loved the idea of Angus, everybody thought it was great. I was recently amazed to hear that there had been over 35 million viewings of that clip. And the whole clip was made for about 300 bucks.
The vision was that they were going to go out and conquer the world. No one was going to stop them.
Probably from the beginning, we had that arrogance that we could do it. We had no fear. I was thought as a band, we could go out and stand up with any band in the world. By 1976, AC/DC had gone as far as they could in Australia. They were hugely popular. So in April '76, they went to London, and one was probably thinking, well, this is my second chance. It didn't work for Fraternity. This has to work this time. Well, here we are, welcome to down to London, and we've been searching around. What better group to start off with in London than our own Australian group and the AC/DC? Yeah, this is amazing.
Tom absolutely knew he was in a band that was going to take over the world. He really did.
You took more time here than I've ever seen anywhere in my life.
Yeah, speaking of this place, a place that people come to sit and look at other people sitting and looking at other people.
He wasn't ignoring himself or the band. He just saw the future.
So when did it build up to the first journey?
We used to play down here pretty regularly, and we were following on them.
Yeah.
I think in the first thing we ever played was a little pub called the Red Cow. Next night, half that pub was in the National Room. That's not a big place. And then just to tell their friends and then come on.
They were probably the hardest working band on the planet at that stage. I mean, they toured relentlessly. So southern UK was for our parents.
Hello, this is Bob from AC/DC. Saying to stick around, it's really certainly got a brand new single, Jailbreak, coming up. It's something right here. I ain't living alone.
As AC/DC became more successful, that gave Bond more of a platform to live life to the fullest. He was becoming famous. And then his banding allowed him to party, almost an excuse to party. I think he was living his dream as a rock and roll. The girls, the drink, the drugs, he was on stage, he was performing, he was in his element. But when they came back in the late 70s, he was drinking more excessively then. It was a bit of a worry to see him going that way. If
drink like a fish, of course, but, and when, when you look at where I came from, that's saying something, One, really keep head and shoulders above others.
He never acknowledged that he had an alcohol problem. Never, at any stage. Never ever heard him say, oh, I've got to cut back, or take it easy, or whatever. The last time I saw him was getting close towards the end of 79. He seemed to have changed. He wasn't published and laughing. In fact, he didn't laugh very much on that day. He bought that 40-ounce bottle of scotch. He started asking questions about what he loved and he appeared and why did I put that in front of going for it, like he, His holy grail had always been to get to the top in the rock and roll business, and then he come to the stage where he's achieved his dream. He found his holy grail, but the holy grail was there. Just wanted to just look like anything got was, what was it all about?
He said, I really am getting sick of this. I'm sick of being on the road. All I want to do is go to the country somewhere. I'd like to settle down and live an ordinary life like anyone else and just play guitar. Somewhere there, I believe there was a deep core of unhappiness.
He was lonely. He was lonely for companionship. And I think he was now looking for someone to spend the rest of his life with. He was talking about wanting to return to Perth because that's where he felt the most comfortable, and buying a property here. He was looking in Spearwood, which was near his mum and dad.
I think he was lonely. A lot of the guys in ACD said, oh, most of them married him, and he wasn't.
I think he was starting to feel it at the end. I think yes. By the time the Highway to Hell album came out, everything was just falling into place. All their hard work, building up an audience, tour by tour in America. Within the next 12 months, they're expected to be one of the biggest acts on the planet. The next album was going to be the one which was really going to kick them over the post.
And it was the first time in his life that he actually felt he was accomplishing something. He got to be who he wanted to be.
And the more we work, the more we choose, we get more ideas and we get more. This is going to get better and better. I can't see an end to it. It's like really rock and roll.
Over the years, there's been all sorts of theories and beliefs of what really happened to Bond. The band were in London. Malcolm Angus were in the studio, putting some rough ideas down for the next album. The Bond was not quiet at that point, so he's had some time to himself.
My understanding is that he met up with friends and drank way too much. And he came back with a friend.
That was it. Drove Bond back to Bond's place. But Bond had passed out on the way. He couldn't lift him, so he thought, well, I'll take him back to my place, which he did. Bond was sound asleep. And that was it. Went upstairs and made Bond as comfortable as he could in the car.
They came down passing through his late driveway, so that he told, and then the rest is history about the next month.
The coroner found that Bond died of acute alcohol poisoning and death by misadventure. Bond passing as he did on his own in a car in a freezing cold, after all his hard work and all his heartbreak getting there, was just an incredibly sad, lonely, and unglamorous way to go out.
It was just something that shouldn't have happened, and it did happen. Tragically happened.
I hate to say this, but unfortunately he went on die. And under the circumstances, I wasn't surprised. That pattern of getting bored and restless. He was only away from the studio for a few days in London. His woman, he faced here for him, that was excruciating. He drank far too much. I didn't find out if he would push it too far one day. Sadly, the obviously did. I think Bruce pretty well got it right. I really do. Because boredom was a big thing. And that was his biggest problem. I think when he got bored,
It was a terrible time for the band. They were devastated and didn't know whether to continue or not. But there were some parents that were very much behind. You know, they said Fun was never recorded in the song.
So, we decided to go ahead. In the Bond always I always remember Bond telling us how good the vocals was, Brian was.
As soon as we started playing, I was singing with them, and everything. My head was standing and you know, it was fantastic. It was wonderful. I'd never sang with a band this good.
With Brian Johnson and the Back in Black album, AC/DC just really took off. And to this day, decades on, they're still the biggest rock act in the world. Which was bittersweet because it was where Bond was going to be.
Thousands on thousands of academic bands have come down here to Fremantle to pay tribute to the band and the former frontman, Bon Scott.
The thing about Bon Scott is that as time's gone by, his legend has become bigger.
He is now considered by millions of people around the world the rock and roll singer, the rock and roll frontman.
There's a sounding global legacy things that all these years later, those songs just live on.
The story has grown, isn't it? 42 years later, people want to know more about it than ever. And it's hard to believe. It really is hard to believe. You know, I wish he could see it and know that. But he made it. He really did make it. Ron would have been 75. If Ron could see what was happening in the world today over himself, I think he'd have a good laugh. He really would. He'd be surprised, but he'd have a good laugh.
It certainly inspired me. I think that's why he was more American for me, an inspiration. Even when I hear him talking in old interviews, I still laugh. Even if I've seen it 20 times, I still laugh and chuckle along with him. And he was a special guy. He really was. I wish I had got to know more, but I didn't. That's right.
AC/DC, one of the most unique and successful bands in the history of rock music. From their humble beginnings remote Australian city of Sydney over a 10-year period, the band's simple, infectious, techno-prisoner's rock sound conquered the world.
I think ACDC just gave gimmicks free rock and roll. Good gimmicks free rock and roll. That's what they're about. Good times, blistering chords, and just everyone having a bloody good time.
ACDC wants the world. They wanted to be everywhere. They wanted everyone to know who they were. They were on a mission. They had the ambition and they had the determination to get there and to do it and make it work.
Set up by brothers Malcolm and Angus Young in the early 70s, the band did not hit their stride until the arrival of legendary frontman Bon Scott, a singer who had become one of rock's most enduring and unique icons.
Somebody asked him, embracing your beast and trying to get him out on the right of fashion, and that's exactly what he was. He was the fulcrum. He was the focus. He brought the whole thing together. When he arrived, suddenly flashed everything together. He was unique. He was one of the uniques, and he had an impishness about him, and he had a twinkle in his eye. Well, I always had a twinkle in his eye. He had that cheeky little smile. We just knew that if he had some fun with him, you were going to have some fun. Bon Scott was the real hero.
This is the story of AC/DC's ascendance from Sydney pop rockers to a stadium rock phenomenon. The story of one band's determination to become rock and roll legends. In 1963, the Young family from Glasgow, Scotland, relocated to Sydney, a major city on the east coast of Australia. After passing through hotels in the centre of town, the family settled in the suburb of Burwood. It was here that Malcolm Young and younger brother Angus, the driving force behind rock Goliath AC/DC, grew up. Angus was quickly enrolled in Burwood Public School, where he met Jeff Curtin and his brother David.
We first met Angus probably about 1964, 1965, I think it was, at Burwood Public School. From there, we actually used to go to their house after school to play. Some little house. It was near the police station. I remember the mother was a really nice lady. We used to go out to a bit of mischief on weekends. We used to go to Stratfield, we had an old fruit shop down there. We used to go down there and buy fireworks. And I remember one time we went down there, I think we bought we ended up with a box of cigars anyway. So we all got a bit sick after that, and we smoked. So we never smoked cigars again after that.
On leaving Burwood Public School, both Angus and Malcolm attended the local Ashfield Boys High School. Here they met Steve Armstrong, with whom they formed a strong friendship.
I first met Angus and Malcolm at school in 1967 at Ashfield Boys High School. We used to knock around together on the weekends with a whole regiment and pitch and hang out and have fun. Malcolm, as a young boy at school, he was sort of fond of being the, well, I thought he was the street boy at first. He was a larrikin, but none of us had hope in hell of getting a girl when Malcolm was around because he got them all. And I mean all. Angus. Well, there was a young guy that, he obviously, he was a larrikin. That's the word I could use to describe him. He had attitude, and he had an attitude with everybody. But of course, got that. A great guy. I got the impression that he was always in the shadow of Malcolm, especially where the girls were concerned. But Angus had that real attitude and was not frightened to display it to anyone. Through the week, they would have to do their guitar lessons after school. We didn't do them after school. But on the weekends, they would come out, they'd catch the bus, I suppose, and they'd come around with, there was quite a large group of them on the weekends, and they blended in very well, and they were just like, some boys, mate. That was great.
The first member of the Young family to make his name in the music business was elder brother George, whose writing partnership with Harry Vander formed the backbone of the band's Big Easy Beats. This pop comeback Monaco were having significant success while Malcolm and Angus were youngsters.
We were there when Alexander and Young sort of came back from overseas when they were easy boots, came back from tour. There are memories of them playing with our slot car truck out the back of their house and having a good time when they came back from tour. And I remember Angus getting a nice Jaguar radio which had volume control on the tyres and the channel changes. It was a beautiful gift that he got, amongst other things, but that was one that sort of stands out in mind, never seen his life before. We all knew George was successful as part of the Easy Boots. I, for one, never got to meet George, but admired their music, loved their music. We didn't view Angus and Malcolm any differently because George was their older brother. We just treated Angus and Malcolm the same as you or I or anybody else.
Along with writing and production partner Harry Vander, George was to take a keen interest in his younger brother's music, both in their youth and in later life.
I think George was a very major influence on their career because, and I think their parents were too, because they used to say that guitar practice was a must after school, homework first and then guitar practice. Well, it would have been very advantageous to have a brother like George Young. But Malcolm and Angus, of course, would have grown up as little kids with a genuine bona fide rock star as a brother. And not just that, but they had people like Stevie Wright coming out of the house and all the other members of the Easy Beats, which is probably a normal way of life. Also, as far as ambition is concerned, it would have been trying for them to have great ambitions because they'd seen it already demonstrated with Georgia. So it would have been very, very important in the formative years, for sure. There's quite an age gap between George Young and Angus and Malcolm Young. George had success in the 60s with the Easy Beats, Friday on My Mind. We're working with Harry Vander, who has formed a very successful production partnership with. And for Angus and Malcolm growing up and looking up to a brother, an older brother, considerably older brother, albeit still a sibling, who was already immersed in the music business, knew about the insights of the music business, gave them two key advantages. First of all, it gave them someone who encouraged them and didn't knock them down, as might have happened had they come from a family where nobody had had success as a musician. Secondly, it showed them the pitfalls, which was also quite crucial, because Malcolm especially is very shrewd. He's always been very much about keep an eye on everything, know where the money's going, make sure you take every step and every advantage that's going. So George Young's success, not just musically, but also in terms of the business, had a huge effect on Angus and Malcolm, and I think positively.
Malcolm soon joined his first band, the creatively named Velvet Underground. They began playing at several low-key gigs across Sydney.
I think for any successful musician, or anyone successful in life, your first break is the most important bit. Gets you on route, gets you on the way. And for a musician, be it Malcolm Young, be it Angus Young, be it whoever, to get in the band and get out and play shows and tour proves one or two things. You either got it or you haven't. And going on stage at an early age of Malcolm with the Velvet Underground, albeit it didn't have success particularly, but it was successful for Malcolm because it proved to him he could do it. He could get up there on stage and make things happen. So I think the spark was lit, and once the fire was burning, there was no way it was ever going to be put out.
Malcolm lost interest in the Australian Velvets and soon began forming his own band. Colin Burgess, previously the drummer of the successful Australian band The Masters Apprentices, was one of the first to join.
Well, I first got involved with ACDC around about 73, I guess, everything, before Christmas. And I had left a band called Masters Apprentices early on, which had lots of hits and stuff like that. And that's how I said, this guy called Alan Kissay rang me up and said, look, Malcolm Young wants to form a band. And I said, sure. I didn't take the time, I didn't know who Malcolm Young was, but and guys on the line, it's George Young's brother, and it's George and Harry. And so he said, come on for a rehearsal sort of thing. So I said, yeah, okay, so I didn't mind. Great, sounds great. As a matter of fact, Malcolm played absolutely fantastic guitar because it was a three-piece band, and the
the time.
Colin and bassist Larry Van Creek were in, and after the successful jam, the three-piece began looking for a start. Enter Dave Evans.
Well, I first met Malcolm Young after I hosted an ad in the Sydney Morning Herald. I had heard of Malcolm before. He'd been in a band called Velvet Underground, which was a Sydney band. But he left the band when I joined as singer. So I heard about Malcolm, and but then Velvet Underground broke up, and that's why I said, yeah, in the paper. And when the voice, the other end of the phone after a while, said, Dave Evans, and he went, I felt young. He heard about me, of course, from the boys of Velvet Underground. And he said, look, I've got a couple of guys here. I'm forming a rock band. Come over and work jam. So that's what happened. I went to Newtown in Sydney. And I met the two boys. One was Colin Burgess on drums. He's been a big star with the Masters Apprentices in the 60s. And also Larry Van Creek, I didn't really know him. We jammed, and it was great. We shook hands and we had that.
A week later, Malcolm introduced a fifth and final member to the band.
After we formed the band, Malcolm asked if Angus could audition for us. So Angus then auditioned for us. We still didn't have a name yet, by the way, the band. He auditioned for us, and of course we got problems, good player, so Malcolm was really a formality, really. Then there's 5% in the band.
The band began rehearsing regularly. It was apparent to all that the group had potential.
Well, we got out of the band right from the very word go. It was very exciting, even in the rehearsal room. It was quite edgy. It just clicked straight away. And Malcolm got Georgia Cohen to listen to us. It was exciting again for me. Georgia from Easy Beats. That was fantastic to meet Georgia. George thought the band was great. Just energy power.
On December the 31st, 1973, AC/DC played their debut gig at the Checkers Club in Sydney.
That club Checkers was the top nightclub in Sydney. And we got the very first gig there on New Year's Eve, I guess, because of the personnel of the band. Colin Burgess, of course, and the two young brothers, brothers of Georgia and Easy Beats. There was obviously great expectations for the band was going to be great. And we were. We just did what we did. It was fantastic. It blew them away. With a fantastic beginning.
Well, you're running up songs like Stuck in the Beatles and maybe Stones and a couple of others a long time ago. But it was mainly covers. We did a couple of original songs, a long time ago.
It's really part of Australian rock anyway. You've got to go out there from a very word go and just hit them between the eye and the crowd and really hit them. And you've got to maintain that all through the set. In fact, toward the end of the set, you've actually got to crank up. It's sort of like a blitzkrieg, you know what I mean? And that is part and parcel of what Australian rock's all about.
It actually went pretty well to me because you're playing covers and things like that, because that's what the crowd knows. The crowd doesn't know any of your songs, you might as well be playing to nobody because they've never heard those before. So if you've got people who are there for New Year's Eve, they're going to know the songs you're playing. If they can't know the songs you're playing, why do it? So get it up there. But it takes a while to get a band established because you keep on going until you do. So the way it's established itself, pretty checkers, which is quite good. That was that.
The band was given a residency at Checkers and also began to play all across Sydney. They soon gained a reputation as one of the best rock and roll acts in the area.
Most Australian bands were so far away from the rest of the world. And the main influences, of course, were English bands, British bands, and American bands. And I guess Australia just realised we've got to try hard because we had all the top acts from the world coming up to Australia, impressing the Australian public and being a local boy. You know, we knew we were just as good or better than these guys, but we had to prove it. So the crowd were very sceptical. They'd seen all the great stars coming out here playing Festival Hall. So our attitude as Australia was to get out there and absolutely blow it away. ACDC are like that, always happy, always will be. That's what their forte was, that's what their forte is. They go up there and however good the records are, they sell themselves on stage. And they knew from the start, if we're going to make it in Australia, we have to be seen on stage because that's where we can make things work. Well, the set, when we first started, was mostly Chuck Berry, Trot Bar, Club Rock and Roll, some Rolling Stones, Free, but also there was a couple of original numbers that had written, and also Richard Jam. Sometimes we didn't have enough numbers. Malcolm would say, right, we're doing this in E or A or G or whatever. I could sing it G, but that. Just follow me. And he just started riff, and the band follow in, and I just make up a list and the song on the spot. And a couple of those we did keep, but no one ever recorded. So yeah, from my Rolling Stones, Free, as I said before, Chuck Berry, and they wanted to Malcolm songs and making songs up on the spot. That's how we done it.
By this time, George Young and Harry Lander were working for Albert Productions, a newly formed record company. In June 1974, they decided to take AC/DC into EMI Studios to record and produce the band's first single.
Recording tonight at Hugo was a very exciting moment for me. I remember taking the bus from Bondi into the city. We're all broke, of course, no days. Let's get the bus in there to be in my studio, so that's what it was recorded. I was sitting on the bus, there were people around me, I just wanted to tell anybody that I was going to record the single, but obviously you can't, I was so excited. It was the first time I'd been in the studio too. So I really didn't say much. Harry Vander, George Young were there, with the boys and Colin, that kind of stuff, and my eyes were quite wide, and I was very, very excited. It was all a beautiful song to me, and eventually it did well top.
The first record was completed. With Can I Sit Next to You Girl, the band believed they have a hit on their hands.
I suppose it's got great potential. Especially after starting to get into the original stuff. That's great. I've been in the band that played original stuff and had quite a few hits, lots of hits. And I thought, here we go again, on another roll. Yeah, and I knew they were going to be big, and they were. The first single, Can I Sit Next to You, was very early AC/DC. It's very much finding that beat. You can hear the genesis and the germ of the sound we know and love today, and would make them into mega stars, but it's very much in the early days. And I think Harry Vander and George Young being there as producers, co-producers, helped and hindered. Helped in the way that because they knew their way around the studio, they could bring out certain things, and make certain suggestions. I think it hindered because AC/DC was still a little confused as to where they were going musically. And what Vander and Young did almost is accentuate the confusion. So while they were expert and prolific in the studio, what they didn't seem to actually appreciate right then was letting AC/DC be themselves. So they were adding to the confusion by adding in ideas. You end up with a good song, but doesn't really have much impact because it's not well presented. Not talking about production, I'm talking about presentation and arrangement. It's something they learned very fast there.
Despite the imminent release of their debut single, there were growing tensions within the band, and conflicts occurred.
The first casualty, I suppose, on AC/DC, Colin Burns. Colin, at the stage, wasn't very popular with, I guess, Melanie Young. He'd been a black star in the 60s, etc. He'd been very popular with the girls. We'd arrived at places and Colin had a girl on his show and this kind of stuff, and I thought it was great. And but Malcolm Angus was talking on his back, was a rock star, pop star. I was very, very jealous of Colin. And one night when we were playing at Checkers, Colin just seemed out of sorts, really. drum hole and laid his flat his face on the stage beside the drummers.
One night I come along there and had a couple of drinks before him. I mean, I wasn't drunk. I mean, I've never fallen off my drums in all my life, and I never have, and I never will again. No, what actually happened, I come along and I left for the drink, and I left on the table, and I went behind to go and have a check and see what made the drums set up for the night, etc. And I come back about half an hour later on, and I grabbed the drink because we was going to go on, and I stole this thing. I said, okay. So we go and we're on stage, and all of a sudden, my head's going woo, 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 it flipped me out. And I sort of turned into jelly. It was like, I did go to this roll, and I kept going. If you talk to Andy Evans, he'll say the same thing. I did this long roll, and I kept on rolling, roll on the floor. We called the whole to the set, obviously, we had a drum. And we came cold off the stage. And I was worried, I didn't know what happened. 10 minutes later, so I can walk up to me and pull me sacked me. Quite obviously, it was but nothing said, oh, okay, yes, those drums you can't play, and you got the sack. So, well, it took me, I had to sit down for a while when I come on stage because I mean, I was like jelly. I mean, suppose I had a trip or something going to be done, something to go in my bed. But whether Angus and Malcolm will say that, I don't know if they say that, because, you know, who knows what they'll say.
I was shocked. You know, when it did happen, I was shocked. I like Cole, still do. But he was sacked. And that was important to things to come, believe it.
With the newly recruited rhythm section, the band went on the road to promote the single. It was decided, however, that a change of image was needed to separate AC/DC from their contemporaries.
Malcolm and Angus informed the rest of us that Angus was going to be dressed in a schoolboy uniform, short pants and all that sort of it. And Malcolm was going to wear a sort of a white silk Evans jumpsuit with boys with jumpers type things. And he asked us to let's think of something. So the drummer at the time, Noel Taylor, came up with an idea of wearing sort of a hull and sort of cloud outfit with a top hat. The bass player, Neil Smith, come up with a New York cop sort of outfit with a crash helmet, joggers and dark glasses, that kind of stuff. And I came up with the idea of the ultimate parody of a rock star, I guess. It was a cross between Rod Stewart and his jackets and stuff like that, and Slade. So when we actually went out at Victoria Park there in Sydney, we did over their concert, the fans that were out there knew what was like, they'd seen us. But when we walked out, the reaction was quite amazing, to tell you the truth. Schoolboy uniform and the rest of us. We played the same music, obviously, and it had a great reaction. And the schoolboy uniform seemed to do something against his young because he really ripped up the stage and just went berserk. I'd never seen him like that before. After we'd been gigging for a few months with this look, another band in Australia came out called Silence, and they had weird gear on too, cloud outfits and all that kind of stuff. Although the music was not as hard hitting and heavy as what we were doing. And I guess that's why Malcolm then said, right, we all go back to jeans and t-shirts again, except for Angus. Angus will keep his schoolboy uniform, and that'll make a difference between us and the other band around the place.
Malcolm's decision to make Angus the focal point of the band didn't end with his brother's stage attire.
Malcolm was really, I suppose, the brains, I guess, of AC/DC, and Malcolm was also instrumental in putting Angus forward as the star, as it were, because when we first started, we were like 12 bar, and Malcolm and Angus both played lead, and Malcolm was a great player. So we had two guitarists in the band. The long tour and Malcolm, one day said, "We're not playing lead anymore." Angus was all the lead.
Initially, when AC/DC formed, we were talking about 31 years ago now,
I feel they probably will see as no more than just another bunch of kids trying to make it on a local scene. Nothing more than that. It's only when changes started to happen and they got the right lineup together that the spark started to fly. I think in the early days, it was very much a local band, another stepping stone for Malcolm, with Angus, driving Angus along. The most important thing as far as that is concerned is to got Malcolm and Angus together in the band and prove that these two had something special. And he talked to people around at the time and said, the band weren't exactly great. Rob Singer, Dave Adams, who was the original vocalist, wasn't fantastic. But Malcolm and Angus had something, especially Angus. Because Angus was already developing his stage act, was developing the famous walk, and suddenly people were looking at him and not at Dave Evans.
Evans was growing restless. It seemed to him that his role in the band was being undermined, and arguments inevitably occurred.
We joined, we formed the band as a band, and it was a democratic thing, like the name of the band, and all this kind of stuff, and by this time, the people being sacked left, right, and centre, and also our first manager, he got sacked as well. I was feeling, I suppose, as a family member, I wasn't being consulted with a lot of different decisions, which was quite upsetting, to tell the truth. I guess I'll let my feelings known first to, I guess, Malcolm, who would, at this stage, would be having meetings with Georgia, and just personally telling me what decisions.
It became apparent to Evans that on closer inspection, there were more young brothers in the band than there appeared to be.
I guess George, with his experience, really was a mentor for Malcolm and Angus, and really, I suppose, the unofficial manager. I mean, I didn't really worry about that. I mean, the experience of George Jones was fantastic to draw upon. But, as I say, it became like a clique, of course, of the young brothers, and I realised by this stage that they expected everybody to toe the line of all decisions, and if you're a creative person yourself, or you're young and full of spark and all that kind of stuff, and firing your own belly, that kind of stuff, yeah, it does piss you off. I don't care what decisions you made, but it would have been respectful if you're at least sitting at the table, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Unbeknown to Evans, however, a new character was about to emerge who would change AC/DC's path significantly.
What arrived at suddenly also in place was spark lit. The bulb went on and the fire started to rage.
The Scott family moved from Scotland to Australia in 1952. After settling briefly in Adelaide, they soon relocated to Fremantle, a quiet port south of Perth in Western Australia. Here, young Bon Scott was enrolled in the North Fremantle Primary School, where he befriended Ian Cant, a local boy who has kept close relations with the Scott family to this day.
Right, when we went to primary school together in North Fremantle. Living in North Fremantle in those times was a great place to grow up. And I'm glad that I was born. I was born in North Fremantle. I was born in a hospital at Harvard Road. It was a great place to live in. It was a great place for Bon to grow up in. To grow up around Fremantle, you're a privilege. You know, to be a Fremantle-ite, and that's what people call themselves. They live brought up around Fremantle and still do. It's an atmosphere and an environment that really encourages people to enjoy themselves. And we certainly did back in the 60s and those days. Bon, to me, was a little bit of American, full of life. Bon had an aura, and that showed up from a very early age. He had something that attracted people to him. He had an easygoing nature.
After leaving North Fremantle Primary, both Bon and Ian became students at the local John Curtin High School.
We didn't like to go to it. It was a very good high school. The teachers were good. The environment was good. period in his life and my life, high school was a good time. Yes, it was.
Thorne developed an interest in drumming and played with his father Chick in the Fremantle Quake Band. In his mid-teens, Bond became more interested in rock and roll and began to hang out at the local dances. Here he met Richard Selby, who shared his passion for music and would later become the singer of the Perth band The Troubadours.
I first met Bond, it was probably at St Patrick's Church. They used to have a Sunday dance, a rock and roll dance, on a regular basis. And it began coming, and I was a young high school student, John Curtin High School in Fremantle, same as Bond. And we used to go to St Pat's on a Sunday, and on a Friday we'd go to the Fremantle Boys, and wonderful rock and roll band on. And we'd be there watching the band. There was always something happening in Fremantle with rock and roll, and I think that was a good part of our growing up. Before we actually got into bands, that was influencing us at the time. We'd go and watch the other bands, and that encouraged us to practice a little bit more, try a little bit harder, and try and form our own band.
Thorne soon joined his first group, the Spectors, a cover band in which he was a drummer and occasional singer. They began to play the same dances in which he'd previously been a member of the audience.
In 1964, I joined the Troubadours, and it must have been about the same time, the Spectors were happening. And I think we played a couple of gigs together at a place called the Big Beat Centre in Anzac County first. And that moved later on out to Victoria Park in Albany Highway. And I remember the Spectors, I'm not sure of the venues, I think it was Burns, the Big Beat Centre, where we would share the gigs. And along with other bands like Russ Kennedy and Little Wills, I think John Young and the Strangers, and the better band that loved the rock and roll and playing good rock and roll.
It was in this lively music scene that Bond first met Vincent Lovegrove, lead singer with rival bands The Winstons.
I first met Bond in 1964-65, and he was in a band called Spectors. He mostly played drums. The lead singer then was a guy called John Collins. And Bond used to get up and sing maybe 3 or 4 songs a night. And we often as not found we were playing the same venue. And then I struck up a friendship. The scene in Perth, Australia at that particular time was, there was a lot of cabarets, and they had what they called corkage fees, where you brought your alcohol to a club, which were open till 3 a.m. You paid for your corkage and they would store your alcohol. That's how they got around the licensing laws. There was also a lot of mining going up in the north of Australia at that stage, places like now Tom Price. And the miners used to work on and off. They'd work 6 months and take 3 months off, and they'd accumulate a lot of cash, and they came down to Perth and would spend it in these clubs. The only problem was, and of course they had lots of entertainment there, the only problem was the bands that they wanted to have there were primarily what we called top 40 cabaret bands. In other words, what they did was their club belonged to the top 40 charts and wanted to do it on radio. There was no originality of the band. So therefore there was a lot of places that opened up in the surf clubs along the west coast. One we played a lot, it was a place called Swanbourne, and they were called Stomps.
While leaving school, Bond became a postman, delivering mail by day and playing concerts by night.
I met Bond at Fremantle Post Office in late 1967. We were postmen together. Bond was, laughing all the time and, generally having no good time. But, while with Bond, it was something like 2 lives. He'd come to work, but he'd virtually have his clothes on that he'd been working on at night, not have his uniform on. He'd just say where he'd been playing and where he was going to play, and that type of thing. He actually said to us, why don't you come and see us some nights when we're playing? So, we went to, I think it was Swanbourne Beach, there when he played with the Swanboy and stomped the animal. But we used to go, well, my mates and I used to go to different stomps around the area, and he happened to be one of them. Swanboy was the main one. He had a very good personality, he was a likable chap, and easy to get on with. His personality, I'd say, was at the time better than his singing. But in the end, he was more known for his singing than his personality. But I think he had both, and that was one of his pluses.
In the end, it was Bond's friendship with Vince Lovegrove that proved to be the most fruitful for his career, and turned him from a drummer into a frontman.
I suggested to him one time that he should, sing more, rather than play drums. But it wasn't his band, the band was led by John Collins, and he was the man, he was the singer, and there wasn't any way that Bond was going to make it to be full-time singer about that. And because both of the bands were in competition, it was a very competitive field at that time, I suggested to Bond that we join ranks and had formed one band and had two lead singers.
The Valentines were born, and soon developed into the biggest gigging band in Perth.
I'm scared of digging, my skin is green, but the trees are clean. What colors they love me.
In particular, the distinctive teaming of the two charismatic frontmen set the band apart from their contemporaries.
So that's pretty smooth, I can't think that. But Vince was more laid back, obviously, than Bond because of the personality. And Vince had sort of, this star aura, whereas Bond had this mischief, this thing about him, this twinkle in his eye, this look in his face, that would sort of bounce off Vince. Vince was the cool one, and it was most interesting to see that. The main reason we did it was because probably both of us weren't really confident enough to lead the band on our own. And we worked off each other a lot. We had a pretty wild stage act at the time. We used to jump off on amps and have fire bombs going off on stage, and all sorts of weird stuff. And we fired off each other. We definitely dealt with, we worked out stuff beforehand, what we would do and what we wouldn't do.
With the Spectres and the Valentines that came along a little bit later, and the Valentines were a fusion of the Spectres and Vince Lovegrove's other band, I think I called Winston, but they also came out of another thing that was kind of influential in Australia, which European people would recognise, was that whole instrumental rock tradition of like the Shadows. And so in Perth in the early 60s, you had what were called stomps. That was like dances that surfers went to, because the big surf scene, there's great beaches over there. And so there was a bit of that shadow sound that was like surf music sort of coming in a bit. And the kids, these were just teenage boys taking on electric guitar because they saw Hank Marvin doing it. And the Beatles come along and they got long hair and they sing. So the Australian group, and particularly in Perth, was really isolated. Really just making it up, making up the rules for yourself, because there were absolutely no